Welcome back to another episode of the Bound to Improve podcast, where we read a book a week and we take the challenging, complex ideas of that book and turn them into actionable steps for progress. My name is Chris Pound.
My name is Landon Eller.
And the book that we read this week was Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
So, going right into it, who's David Goggins? Most of you had probably seen his social media clips of him doing crazy things, but just to give a little bit of a background on him, he is a retired Navy SEAL, an ultra endurance athlete, and holds many more titles from everything. He used to hold the world record in pull-ups in 24 hours and probably many more things.
Yeah, very accomplished individual.
Yeah, and he went from a really rough childhood to an overweight exterminator into one of the world's most disciplined and resilient figures, and he now inspires millions through a story of grit and perseverance. So how this book was kind of broken up is he would give a little story that has lessons provided throughout it, and then he would present a challenge at the end of that story. And each of these were in chapters. So we're going to kind of go chapter by chapter, give you a little background on the story, and give you the challenge so you can implement it as well.
In David's early childhood, he grew up with his mom, his dad, and his older brother. He had a very difficult early childhood, lots of emotional traumas. He lived in a great neighborhood, and so from that perspective, everybody thought that he had a great life, but that's not the full story. And David really goes into depth on what it was truly like growing up around his father, who owned a skating rink.
Yep.
And David and his whole family would have to work the skate rink during the night and then come back home at like 6 a.m. in the morning and then get ready for school. And school was really the only place where David could kind of loosen up and relax a little bit, because he was always on edge from his father, who pretty much just abused him and the rest of his family.
Yeah, and like Chris said, they went from and worked at the roller rink from 4 to midnight, and then his mom put him into the office to try to get some sleep while there was still music going on in the upstairs bar. Then they would take him all home at the end of the night around 6 in the morning, and then they'll have to wake up and go to school. And David struggled in school because he could not stay awake.
Yeah, he was so tired because he was just overworked from a very young age.
Yeah, so eventually his mom mustered up enough courage to move them over to Indiana, where she had some family, but David still ran into a whole new set of problems, which we'll talk about throughout the rest of the book. But the main theme and lesson here was he was dealt a terribly unfair hand.
Yeah.
And he had every excuse in the book to stay stuck in that rut that he was in, and become like his dad.
Yeah.
Which would have been terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But he found a way to get out of that.
Yeah, this chapter kind of sets the tone that no matter how bad your start is, you can still rewrite your story. And the power comes from facing it head on and deciding to not let that define you, right? Everybody has different cards that they're dealt, but it's just about how you play those cards. And David was given a very crappy hand, but he decided, instead of quitting on himself and his primarily his mother, that he would use that hand to the best of his abilities.
Yeah, and rewrite his story. So this leads us right into the challenge. The first challenge that David presents is to own your hand. So, like Chris said, everyone gets presented some sort of bad hand in life, or maybe you've had too good of a hand, which leads you to become a little bit complacent and not reach your true potential. So, kind of ask yourself these questions: what's your bad hand? What kind of pain or baggage are you carrying? What mental, emotional, or physical limits are holding you back right now? And this is where David says to go grab your journal.
Yep. He talked about using a journal quite often in these challenges. And so the first challenge here, he talks about don't sugarcoat it. Describe all the pain and the setbacks and all the struggles. Write everything out in detail. This is a hard thing to do, But if you're going to face your challenges and your setbacks face on, then this is a process that you have to go through in order to grow as a person.
Yeah, this matters because it isn't venting. This is gathering fuel. So if you go back to Patrick David's your next 5 moves, you have to use the negative things that's happened in your life or people have said to you as rocket fuel to get to that next level. So like Goggins, you want to turn your pain into momentum in your life.
Yeah.
So,
face it, own it, and then rise above it.
Yeah.
Moving on to chapter 2 here. Just as soon as life seemed to almost kind of settle down and stabilize, David's mom was getting ready to remarry another person, and David really kind of looked up to this guy. They would play basketball together, and it was almost the father figure that he never had in his life. And unfortunately, as soon as they were about to get married, he was shot and killed, and David had to face that new challenge face on as well.
Yeah, and life started to unravel from there. He had to bounce between schools. He had to cheat his way through classes because, like we said, he struggled in school, and no one ever took the time to sit down with him to help him solve and figure out what it was he was struggling with.
Yeah.
So what he did to compensate for that was just cheat his way through. And he also faced intense racism throughout being in rural Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the only black kids around. So he faced verbal, physical harm, and even like violence, like someone even pulled a gun on him.
Yeah. And one of the things that David really enjoyed doing as a kid was playing basketball, and unfortunately he was cut from the basketball team, which could have been a blessing, maybe not, but he also failed the Air Force test, or the AFAB, the ASFAB, sorry, which is the military's standardized testing, and he was also unfortunately flunking out of high school.
So as all these things are unraveling, one day he got out of the shower, he just looked himself in the mirror, and he started like questioning his identity, who he was. He had to face himself. Like he discovered was the root of all of his problems. And this is what got started as the accountability mirror. In this mirror ritual where he took Post-it notes and put all of his goals, struggles, etc. on the mirror, so every night when he faced himself, he knew where he stood.
Yes.
So what's the main lesson or theme of this chapter story that David was telling? It's about radical ownership. You have to be brutally honest with yourself. He realized that change only comes from when you confront your flaws, fears, etc. Because it's, in the end, it's you versus you.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps you to grow that thick skin and take small steps, which is when he wrote out those Post-it notes for his goals. He wrote in tiny detail what he needed to do to reach his ultimate goal.
Yeah, and this is where challenge 2 comes in, the accountability mirror. Get some Post-it notes, and start facing your truth. Start to realize, okay, these are the things that I am currently experiencing, or things that I may experience, but I have to face these things. Write down everything you need to own, your fears, your weakness, your regrets, and then write down your biggest goals, whether it's physical, mental, career, or a lifestyle goal. Write everything in detail on Post-it notes and put them on the mirror.
Yeah, each step should get a Post-it note so you can be able to track that progress as well. And once you stick them on the mirror, you have to face that mirror every single day. So it's just a good reminder and a way to keep you accountable.
Yeah, and this isn't about tearing yourself down. It's about building someone new. It's okay to be unkind in the moment because you're committed to the kindness in the long run. Start this ritual, stay consistent, and watch the mirror change over time. Start smashing those goals.
So after David graduated high school and moving into chapter 3 here, he ended up passing the military test and was able to join the military and served his 4 years of duty. And then afterwards, he was security at a hospital during the night shift and eventually became an exterminator, where he went to a whole bunch of restaurants and sprayed them for insects or other things. And during this time, he was huge. He had a big eating problem where after every shift he would go get chocolate shakes, chocolate donuts, and then he would just basically sleep or slack off the rest of the day.
Yep.
So
and then that one morning, he stumbled upon a commercial for the Navy SEALs, and it kind of just lit a fire in him.
Yeah, and so we started doing some more research and got into and was talking with a recruiter who saw something special in him. Even though he was currently 300 pounds and you had to be under...
You had to be 191 pounds for his height. But again, he had to lose 106 pounds in 3 months or he wasn't going to make the cut.
Yeah, so what he had to do was just be extremely uncomfortable and take small actionable steps to be able to lose what people thought would be impossible. So the main theme and lesson of this chapter is just about the power of discomfort, and you have to be able to seek this out and not avoid it. David's transformation wasn't luck. He willed it into reality.
And he made his own luck from the efforts and the grinding that he put in for himself. I mean, 106 pounds in 3 months, that's insane.
Yeah.
And it's not like he was Ozempicing himself. I mean, he was literally putting in the work, and he started at the bare minimum where he couldn't even run. And so he had to get on the bike in order to start to lose the weight until he built up the strength in order to start running.
Yeah, the real growth lies in discomfort, and it's never going to be easy, but it's what you have to do to be able to create positive change.
Yeah, and he calls this the path of a calloused mind, hardened, not numb, but resilient.
So this leads right into challenge number 3 that David presents, and it's do one thing that sucks, then go and do it again. The first step to mental toughness is getting uncomfortable on purpose. So here he says to grab your journal again and write a list of things that you hate doing. Either it makes you scared, you fear it, you just hate doing it in general, and then pick one of those items and then do it today.
Yeah, keep in mind, it's all about moving the needle rather than not making excuses. Start building a daily habit of facing what you are always avoiding. Run in the rain, make that call, say no to comfort food. It's just about doing things that you're just not comfortable doing. So, like, for example, if you want to start running but you hate running, that's a prime example. Just start somewhere. If you can't run a mile, run a quarter of a mile. And then once you can do that, go to half a mile. Once you can do a half a mile, go to a mile. Just keep building on top of that foundation.
And that ties right back to atomic habits too. Maybe try to tie it to something that's like automatic on the morning. Like as soon as you brush your teeth, that's a signal to start putting on your shoes and getting ready for a run in the morning or something like that. Just remember that pain creates change. So it's all about what you start doing today.
And don't forget about the little victories along the way, because those fuel the fire and the momentum to keep you going.
So now this brings us to chapter 4, and during this, Goggins describes he went through a multitude of hell weeks, they call it, in the SEALs, and during his third one, Goggins and his team were constantly targeted by instructors trying to break them. So instead of folding like a majority of the people who try out for the SEALs do, because it's tough,
hard.
It's mentally challenging, they tried to fight back with excellence. So they did a whole bunch of different things. So one of the things they did was a boat run where you have to carry the boat above your head and follow your instructor. So instead of letting the instructor get so far out in front of him, they stayed right on his heels the entire time.
Yeah.
Then another thing was a boat lift. So you take your boat and you throw it up in the air with your team. Sorry, they actually press it up in the air.
Yeah.
But instead of just pressing it, they threw it up in the air to catch the attention of the instructors. And this was during the heart of Hell Week when most people were mentally drained.
Yeah, and their goal was to take their souls, which I think is kind of a funny concept, but it makes total sense. You go break the will of the people trying to break you. It's not about revenge. It's about showing that nothing could shake them, that they're the hardest people on the face of the earth because they're doing things that nobody would want to do in the first place. And the whole idea behind the Hell Week is to kind of pick out the people who aren't really cut for becoming a Navy SEAL. And by taking their souls, it's showing them that you cannot break Goggins and his team.
Yeah. So that's exactly what the lesson was in this chapter is life is all just a mind game. And taking souls means using excellence to flip the script on people that doubt you, hate you, or try to want to see you fail, which is kind of what the instructors are meant to do during Hell Week, is try to, like Chris said, weed out those ones that are not mentally capable.
Yeah.
And here it's about gaining psychological dominance. You're not gaining this through ego when you're doing this, but you're gaining it through relentlessness. And that's like pushing to, when everybody's mentally drained, it's finding that next level within yourself to kind of push you and make you feel like, wow, like make the instructor think, wow, he's not going to be able to be broke by no matter what I do to him.
Yeah, and to do that, you have to know the battlefield, when to push, when to stay quiet, and when to strike. Keep in mind, all pain ends, but how will you respond to that? That's a bigger question, and that's what makes you unstoppable.
Yeah, so challenge 4, let's take a soul this week. Think of a competitive situation you're in right now, whether it be in sports, work, school, life, anything, and decide how can you flip that dynamic by outworking, outlasting, and outshining the other person.
Yeah, and so we have a couple examples here from the book. First off, if you're not getting playing time, dominate practice, watch extra film, show up early. If the teacher underrates you, write papers she didn't assign, out-research the class. Boss doesn't respect you, get in early, stay late, deliver beyond expectations. Don't whine, don't wait, just make them watch you, do the things that they could never do. And this takes us on to chapter 5. Goggins went through 3 different Hell Weeks during Navy SEAL training. And on his 3rd one, he finished Hell Week with fractures in both of his shins. Could you imagine that? Like going through Hell Week and your body is literally broken, but nothing can break you because it's all in your head, it's all in your mind. It's literally you versus you. And if you never give up.
And before you continue too, like Hell Week isn't even, I think it's there's 3 phases and it's during the first phase.
Yeah.
So he still had 2 more phases where he had to make it through with broken shins.
Yeah, he had months. He had like 20 weeks of Navy SEAL training to just become a Navy SEAL. And through Hell Week, he had already pretty much broken his entire body. But he wasn't going to stop.
Yeah, so what did he do? They had to run constantly. Like it was a 6-mile run to even get to the food hall in the morning. So to try to stabilize his shins and bones, he would duct tape his entire leg every single morning. And this kind of leads us to the end of his training for the SEALs. The instructors stopped punishing him. Like, for example, when the whole team was slacking, then they would usually require them to do push-ups, butterfly kicks, bear crawls, etc. But they told Goggins just stop doing it because he enjoyed it too much. He enjoyed the suffering. And he was basically just feeding off of that. And that's what leads us into the lesson of this chapter, which is the armored mind that he developed.
Yeah, an armored mind is built by choosing resilience over excuses again and again. It's about remembering what you've overcome to reinforce that you don't break. When negative thoughts creep in, and they will, your armored mind fires back with clarity, repetition, and preparation.
And it's every day you go through mental warfare. Like in the book, it said you have 2,000 to 3,000 thoughts an hour. Just think of that as like shots on goal. Like eventually, some of those pucks are going to get past the goalie.
Yeah.
So you still have to have an armored mind to be able to take in those shots that get past the goalie and be able to deflect them and get them out of there.
Yeah. And this brings us to challenge 5, build your armored mind. Pick a challenge or a goal that feels like it's just out of reach. Now visualize the entire path, not just the win, but the setbacks, the fatigue, and the obstacles.
You have to be able to ask yourself and know the answers to some tough questions. And the first one is you really have to know your why. Why are you really doing this? Next is what darknesses are you using for fuel? And lastly, what pain has already calloused your mind? And a key point to remember is that visualization is preparation. And this is not a shortcut. You still have to do and put in all of the work.
Yeah. And this takes us to chapter 6. Goggins, he really wanted to run the Badwater 135, and it was mainly to raise money for a foundation that he was involved with. And what is the Badwater 135? It's a brutal ultramarathon in Death Valley. It's one of the hardest races ever. But he didn't have any prior real running stuff on his resume, and this is a very, very closed race, right? I mean, we're talking thousands of applicants, but only 100 of them are actually able to get in the race.
Yeah, so he had to hurry up and build his resume. So they reached out to one of the people who judge the resumes, and they're like, hey, there's a San Diego one day, which is you run as many miles as you can in 24 hours. And that was in 3 days. So he was like, all right, I'm gonna do it. And the day before, he even did a full body workout.
Yeah.
So he showed up to the race. He was probably a little sore from the day before, and he ended up running the entire race, but he struggled immensely after a certain point. He couldn't see straight. He was urinating himself,
bleeding,
like it was.
His feet were destroyed.
It was a scary sight and probably really tough mentally on him. But to survive this pain, he reached into what he calls the cookie jar. And each little cookie is, you look back on your life, everybody has a whole bunch of small wins and successes that they've accomplished, whether they've overcame something hard, they've reached a goal that they've always wanted to. And every single one of these cookies he pulled out, and it gave him fuel to run that next mile.
Yeah, your small wins, the time you endured, overcame, persisted, those are the fuel for what's next. Those are what you pull out of the cookie jar.
Yeah, so he ended up completing the race, running 101 miles in 19 hours with absolutely zero training. And it was the cookie jar that pushed him towards the finish line. So just to recap, the cookie jar is a mental vault of your proudest moments, times when you defied the odds. So whenever you have those moments of weakness, these are things that you can reach into the cookie jar to remind yourself who you are and what you've all accomplished.
Yeah, and this takes us to challenge 6. Inventory your cookie jar. Open your journal and write down your past victories, times where you bounced back from failures, things you thought you couldn't do, but you did anyway. Challenges you faced head on and survived.
Yeah, so anytime you're about to take on a tough challenge, set a bold goal and then use your cookie jar to help you surpass your wildest expectations. So going into chapter 7 here, after running the San Diego one day, he went up with his wife and his mom to support them running the Las Vegas Marathon. And he wasn't going to run because his body was still pretty beaten down from doing that San Diego one day and running 101 miles in 19 hours. But as soon as he heard the gun go off, something clicked in his mind
took off.
And he just took off, even though he wasn't supposed to run that day. And he ran with Boston Marathon qualifying pace.
Yeah.
And this really, as he was sitting there waiting for his wife and his mom to finish it, he was thinking to himself, what am I truly capable of? So this propelled him into he needed to keep building his resume for the Badwater. So this is when he decided to sign up for and run the Hurt 100 in Hawaii, which is a brutal trail race.
Which he had never done a trail race before, so he wasn't exactly sure what it entailed.
Yeah, and it's 5 laps, and about on lap 4, he started running into challenges. He wanted to just quit and give up, but he would look over the ridge and he would be like, okay, I'll stop when I get to that next peak. So just by moving 5% or so, he ended up finishing in 33 hours and 23 minutes. And after completing all of that in just a brief period of time, he was able to get into Badwater, where he took his training very intense. He would run to work, run during lunch, run after work, and he would run in layers in the California heat.
It was to simulate what it would be like running the Badwater, which is in the middle of Death Valley, which is like one of the hottest places in the United States.
Yeah. And at the very end, he ended up completing the Badwater in about 30 hours. But the main theme and lesson of this chapter was really the driving question of what am I capable of?
Yeah.
Everyone has this thing called like a mental governor, and it's basically an internal limiter that caps what you think you can push yourself towards. So the analogy he gave was like a stock car. There's a governor in it that prevents it from burning too hot, but it also limits how fast you can go.
Yeah.
This is where Goggins introduces the 40% rule. Once you think you're done, you're tapped, you've spent all of your energy, you've really only exerted about 40% of your true potential. You still have 60% left in your tank. And this is where callousing your mind really comes into play and allows you to reach your extra 60% capacity. And this brings us right into the challenge.
Yep. Challenge 7 is remove the governor. Slowly push beyond your mental limits. Next time you feel like you're done, do a little 5 to 10% more. If you normally do 10 reps on something, go for 11th or 12th. If you normally run 3 miles, push yourself a little further. Do the 3.3, 3.5, maybe even 4. You don't know what you're capable of doing until you're pushing beyond your own limits.
So moving right along to chapter 8, after Goggins did a couple of his ultra races, he was gaining mass attention from the media. So a 2-star admiral recruited him to try to boost SEAL applicants. So he spent 2 years traveling, speaking, and training with high schools and universities. And this was all still while doing ultramarathon training. Most people usually do one or the other, but Goggins basically had 2 full-time jobs. The main thread here is don't have any excuses. There's no reason to. He always made time to train, speak, and to be able to serve.
Yeah, hard work is a non-negotiable. Passion, talent, and an obsession means nothing without the grind. Treat each day like a 24-hour mission. Audit your life. Cut the nonsense out. Schedule your day in tight blocks and stay flexible. Build the backstops into your day so when things get delayed, like life gets in the way sometimes, you need to have things, you have to have a system in place to kind of get yourself out of the current situation you're in. And so kind of the example that he used here was when he was training for the Navy SEALs, on exit routes, if the first route was compromised, he always had another 1 or 2 different exit routes that he could call on simultaneously to get his team out of that dangerous situation.
Yeah, and this is where challenge number 8 comes in. You have to schedule it in. Begin treating your time like the precious asset it is. We've covered multiple times through multiple books that you have no idea when that time clock ends. So for the first week, keep your regular schedule, except track everything. Write down every single time that you start and end an activity. So if you're scrolling on your phone the first thing in the morning, write down that time. And then after that first week, kind of go back and reflect. And this leads you into week 2 where you build an optimized schedule using 15 to 30 minute time blocks. You have to be able to still log your time throughout the week and be able to take notes on when you're feeling productive or when your mind's drifting. And then by week 3, you will hopefully start to begin maximizing your productivity, and you're going to be feeling more in rhythm with your new schedule. But throughout all of this, you have to make sure that you include time for recovery, reflection, and goal setting, because it's vitally important and something that most people, including myself, don't really take the time to do.
This takes us to chapter 9. In 2002, Goggins was fresh out of the BUDS training and a full-time SEAL, stationed at bases all the way around the world, essentially. And while others partied when they were off duty, Goggins didn't. He stayed battle ready and focused on improving himself, rather.
Yeah, and this is when they got their peer evaluations back. Their officer in command even said, like, Goggins, you should probably spend more time with the team. Like, it would make the work more enjoyable.
Yeah.
But that wasn't what he was there to do. He was there to execute and do his job. So he spent all those nights that he stayed in studying and learning new techniques and stuff like that. And while they were supposed to be on break, Goggins decided to go to Army Ranger School, which he was already studying for anyways. And during one of the first few sessions, they were kind of poking fun at him, like, there's no way this Navy guy knows the Army Ranger creed.
Yeah.
But he was able to recite all, like, I think if there's 6 stanzas, word for word, and this got him to be elected as first sergeant of that class that he was supposed to lead.
Yeah.
And during this, he lost 56 pounds over this Ranger school, which just shows how intense it was, because it only lasted, I think, 60 to 70 days. And then instead of taking a break, which most guys do after Army Ranger school, he went straight back to being in that next platoon. And this just shows that he wanted to be uncommon amongst all the common. And that leads us into the main themes and lessons of this chapter here.
Greatness is a constant pursuit. Being uncommon amongst the uncommon means stepping up when others are stepping down. It's about self-discipline, ethics, and taking ownership of your actions. Develop a personal code of conduct that sets you apart from the others. This means always thinking of others leading in tough situations and turning every negative into a positive.
Yeah, so some things you can do to be uncommon amongst the common is, like, when you're a true leader, they are able to stay humble, exhausted, and always put their team first, and they never look down on others, and always try to lead by example. And this brings us to the last point here is you have to start with the zero mindset. There's always room to grow, and always more work to do, and always more to learn.
Yeah, and this takes us on to challenge number 9, uncommon among uncommon. Sustaining greatness isn't about meeting it once, it's about continuously striving for it. The key to being uncommon is to keep pushing yourself beyond your own limits, setting bigger challenges, and refusing to get complacent. Torch the complacency in your environment, whether it's coworkers, teammates, or peers, and place obstacles in front of yourself. Growth happens when there is friction. Stay hungry, stay driven, and never let up.
Then we end with chapter 10 here. The first story that Goggins brings up is he wanted to break the world record for pull-ups in 24 hours, which was 4,020 reps, to raise money
for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation.
And it basically helps families who have had a fallen soldier in action. But the first time he attempted it was streamed on the Today Show, and he ended up failing this challenge
on live TV.
Then he tried again at a CrossFit gym in Tennessee, but he failed again. So over the past 2 attempts, he decided that he was going to analyze his failures, decide what worked, what didn't, and then he eventually succeeded on his 3rd attempt.
Yeah, and he got to 4,030 pull-ups in a 24-hour period.
Yeah, and then another story that was in this chapter was he attempted to join Delta Force, which is basically the elite of the Army. And they have to do a whole bunch of, like, I'm going to call them challenges, and to be able to pass or complete the schooling. And his first attempt, he ended up breaking his ankle when he was trying to complete the course, which basically eliminated him right away. And then the second time, he misjudged a checkpoint because he got all up in his head. And then to be able to try to beat the time constraint, he used shortcuts, but they were able to kind of figure that out and ended up sending him home again. So the main point of this chapter and the stories that he provided was failure isn't an endpoint. It's a chance to learn, grow, and refine your approach. It's an essential part of the process of life.
Yeah, failure is often what we need to hear. It's not always what we want to hear. It's an inevitable part of life, and most battles are won or lost in your own mind. Again, it's all about you versus you. You're competing against yourself, and if you let your mind take over, you will lose that battle.
Yeah,
it's about the calloused mind again, right? You got to keep in mind all the different things that you've gone through in your life, and pull into that cookie jar and just keep the flame going.
Yeah, so this leads us right into challenge number 10, the empowerment of failure. So here, get back out your journal and write down your most recent and most heart-wrenching failures that occurred throughout your life. You have to write about all the good things that came from these failures and then reflect on how and why you failed. And some of the questions that you can use are, did it affect your life or your relationships in a dramatic way? How did you think during the preparation and execution stages?
Yeah, most people fail in their mindset, and this is where growth happens. Make a list of what you want to fix and or improve upon. Look at your calendar and schedule your next attempt as soon as possible. Failure isn't defeat; it's an opportunity to get stronger and better.
Yeah, like the pull-up example from Goggins. As soon as he failed the first time, I think he took 2 or so months. And then
it was the second time he failed. When he failed in the Tennessee gym, he said, "I'll be back here in 2 months to do this challenge and break it this time."
Yeah, so that's what he was talking about when he said, write down your failures and then schedule it and get that next attempt marked up and ready to accomplish it.
In his head, he had already visualized himself winning or breaking that challenge, and it was just a matter of time.
So that wraps up our main summary of Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Now moving into our implementation section from last week, which we read The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. And in a couple episodes prior, we wanted to kind of start a newsletter that was more in-depth version of our books, but everything that Eric said kind of went against that. And it talked about multiple times like pivoting throughout the book. And we just don't think that it's going to be an adequate pivot because 1, it's going to take too much time, and 2, we don't have enough eyeballs to know that it's going to provide enough value right now.
We don't know if the product is even worthy of putting something out there like that. So we'd rather just focus on other things first to continue to kind of build our audience and provide the most value to those people.
Yeah, and second off of that is we wanted to switch from vanity metrics, which is just your total amount of views that you're getting on a social media clip or a podcast, to more actionable insights like your click-through rate or your average time watched. And to do that, we're trying new social media tactics, and we're going to measure those to see if they have any effect.
Yeah.
But that leads us to this week's implementation. For me, I think some of these challenges that David Goggins presents, you can do them today. So I want to do most of the ones, especially regarding the ones with the journal, hopefully by next week. But then I hope to try to continue with all of them throughout my life.
Yeah, for me, I want to start breaking my day down into smaller chunks. I'm sure just like a majority of other people, they find themselves just kind of doom scrolling. And I've done things that kind of help me avoid that, but I still kind of find myself wasting a ton of time on things that don't add to my life at all. And so by breaking my day down into kind of like hour chunks, I can transition from doing one thing directly into doing another thing. But the idea behind that is to be 100% focused on the thing you're doing in that 1 hour block. So when the next hour rolls over, whatever you just did in the previous hour, forget about it, move on to the next thing, and put your full effort into that.
Yeah. Then the next section we have here is our favorite quotes. And I'll start off here. Mine's a question that Goggins posed to himself is, what am I capable of? And I think this is a question that everybody should be constantly asking themselves because, like mentioned in this book, the 40% rule says you've only worked yourself to 40% of your true potential.
My quote is, everything in life is a mind game. Whenever you get swept under by life's dramas, large and small, we forget that no matter how bad the pain gets, no matter how harrowing the torture, all bad things come to an end. You just kind of got to move on. Like Marcus Aurelius said, things that happen in your past are like a log thrown into a river. They just flow down and you forget about them. You just got to keep going. All things that you're experiencing in life right now, good or bad, they're gonna come to an end, and you just got to keep going, keep that momentum going.
Yeah. So that wraps up this week's episode of Bound to Improve. Next week we'll be reading Think Again by Adam Grant.
Yeah, check us out on all of our socials, Bound to Improve on Instagram and TikTok, Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and see you next week.